to go in, raise your hand. And when you raise your hand, I'll call on you, and then you can come off mute, share your thoughts, comments. We'd love to hear from everybody on the call, especially people who haven't had the opportunity to share in the past. So just to tee it up a little bit, relationship maps are an unbelievable way to really get to know your customers deeper and understand the dynamics within an organization. What type of questions do you guys have that you'd like for the group to share solutions or best practices with today? If you have any, go ahead and raise your hand. Michael, you're up first.
Excellent. Hey guys, Michael Bucciolato. I'm an enterprise customer success manager at LawGeeks. It's a legal tech AI product. My question revolves around what are the key components that go into building an engagement model post-implementation with the goal to really move relationships forward?
Okay, to move relationships. Okay, Josh.
Good morning, everyone. Looking for recommendations on the best technology that is either scraping LinkedIn or aggregating third-party resources to figure out when executive sponsors have left our customer firms.
Okay, Manan, did I pronounce that right, Manan?
Yep, that's correct. Manan here. Hello, everyone. I'm a customer success director. My question revolves around executive engagement. I would love to hear people's thoughts on how you align executives on both sides, like on the vendor side, which is the customer success managers, and the company which is selling, and on the customer side. Yeah, just wanted to learn the ideas that you have.
Okay, executive engagement, getting people aligned on both sides, on the customer side. Gary.
Hello. Yeah. I mean, really, my question I'd like to put is, what if you've got a particular executive or your contact at the company who really doesn't want to engage?
How do you move the needle with particular individual, a group of individuals that simply won't engage with you, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. We'll take one or two more and then we'll start diving in. Don't forget to lower your hand. If you've already asked your question, lower your hand so I don't call on you again. If you find you have another question, feel free to raise them. Tanya, question.
Hi, I'm Tanya Pena, Customer Success Director with HireVue. It's a video interviewing and assessment platform. My question is about anybody who works with government clients, especially federal. There's a lot of information, especially in the defense, military sectors. It's a lot of information they can't share with you that we really need to know, that helps like inform, our engagement and expansion. And so just some of the challenges, and I'm new to HireVue. I also have a small company, Capital Experience Group, which does customer experience for small businesses. But in this role, just trying to understand folks that are working with the federal government and how to navigate some of those challenges.
So trying to figure out how to get information about people that they won't give you, but you might be able to find it out from other sources.
Other sources, exactly. Or even just making them feel comfortable. Some information really isn't classified, but they like to, at least initially, keep hold close to the vest. And so, how to sort of navigate some of those things at the beginning of the relationship.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Any other questions, burning questions you guys have? If not, we'll move on to just talking about solutions. So let's tackle Michael's question, key components to build engagement model post-implementation and being able to move the relationship forward. I guess there's a lot of different components to that. There's technology, there's practices, there's processes. Who wants to share something? Ziv, you want to share some stuff that you've done?
Sure. That's definitely a very important subject very close to my heart, and something that I'm now doing a lot around. But I think that the first thing I have to say about this question is, I think that the implementation phase, the onboarding, pre-sale or tool onboarding, I think it's a crucial part of building that relationship. I think that's, I usually call it the honeymoon phase. Whatever you do there, whatever you do well there, it's what the customer remembers. And it's definitely what's defining the relationship. I think, again, it depends how mission critical is your product. I think that that's how leeway you get also with the champion or the champions that you work with, because I think that in the end, again, we work with lots of different contacts in different departments. So some of us are working with people in HR, some of us are working with people in operations, some of our are working, we work with marketeers. So it depends how valuable is, or our mission critical is the product for them, how much they use it, how often they use it, and then also how much time they have. So let's say that for marketeers, or our customers in Appstar, they use it a lot, but on the other side, their time is very, very valuable. So it will be very hard for us to get their engagement. I'm not sure I answered the question, but I think that at least the point, I think that most of the relationship I know, the most valuable, actually were built in the onboarding.
Yeah, you know, it's that whole first impression thing, right? So first impression can last all the way through onboarding, because you have people coming into a relationship, and if each of those people doesn't represent well, that can be a guide towards how the relationship goes sometime down in the future, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how you make them feel. That's what they remember.
That's what they remember. That's right. Rika.
By Maya Angelou.
Yes, hi everyone. So this is actually a very good question, and it's similar to what Ziv is talking in the same domain. In my experience, in the onboarding process, we had a lot of development and a lot of custom work that we were doing, and often due to milestone and deadlines, we were delivering the live product, but then we still had what we called debt, product, which means a set of features, some functionality that we didn't go live with. So it was very important to capture that very accurately and actually proceed in making a concrete plan and deliver that debt. Because even if at the beginning they seem to be like, okay, we don't have this right now, if somehow time passed, a few months passed and they didn't have it, it was really coming back to bite us. You have to make sure you complete that. So for me, that was very important. And similar to that is the person who actually was handling this had to be the right one. The nature of the things that we had to do were technical, so we really needed somebody to be able to deal with them, although you were changing the person who was responsible. So we had a different, it was more of a professional services kind of team. We were calling them solution architects. And then it was going to an account manager. But the account manager had to be the right person, had to have the right skills, being able to handle the debt. So that's my sense into it.
So what you were developing while you were delivering product, were those future roadmap solutions for the company in general, or were those products that those particular companies were waiting for and they just weren't ready yet?
I'm not quite sure the or part that you're referring to. We did have a platform, and we were using that for the solution, but they had ability for custom enhancements and other things like that. So, so that was the onboarding, and the relationship was starting like that. The second, if I understood correctly your question, we did have a customer roadmap. I used to call it like that. So it was an ongoing relationship on an annual annual basis. We had to make sure that we were aligned with their roadmap. Often we were helping them develop that roadmap. And so it was both parts.
Excellent. Gotcha. Okay. Andreas, good morning.
Good morning. So I use for the actual mapping of all those relationships kind of in an org chart type model, something from way back when. It was actually a sales methodology called target account selling, where you map approvers, decision makers, evaluators, users, other mentors, other non-supporters, etc., etc. So that all the contacts that we are collecting, we can put them also in kind of a political influence map and also see gaps. So like Rika was saying, well, if you have someone very technical that you need to engage with, it's like, who are the folks in that spectrum in the company? Who is our contact there from the relationship that they have and the view that they have, and who are other people around that can help us to get to the right people or to neutralize people that are not that favorite to us.
Were you able to color code them so you can see who influenced other people and whether they had good relationships internally with each other?
So in the original manifestation, yes, but this information lives actually in Salesforce, kind of as extra fields. So it's more captured there, not as the whole relationship map. That would be beautiful to have it in like some org structure view with all the color codes and things around. But you can at least derive it from there. And if you live in the account, you kind of know what's going on.
Makes a lot of sense. So what technologies have you guys used that to build? I know Andreas talked about having an org chart model. Are there any other technologies that you guys have used and found to be beneficial for building a really quality relationship map? Ziv?
Yeah, so I actually, in the last year or so, I'm looking for technologies, but for the meantime, we've built the main data in Salesforce, and we visualize it in Looker, and we play a little bit with having like a Sankey graph in Looker. But the main thing that I think that I'm taking from my current last 6-7 months of development is that we decided that we are focusing on significant relationships, because in some accounts, we can have 40, even 50 contacts that we're using, that they use the product or even more. But we focus on 3, 4, 5, 6, and just like Andreas mentioned, the first thing that we define is the type of the relationship, and it's a CSM to a user, or a CSM to a champion or to an executive, and of course to a decision maker. And we can be also a team leader, director, and is then an executive. I think it's a very, very good step for us. So for me now, I have visibility of all the relationships in all teams with all customers, and then the two other parts that we are evaluating or asking customer success managers to evaluate is, one is what is the strength of the relationship from 1 to 5, and the second thing is how personal do they know that person. Very good start.
So great. So you mentioned strength of relationship. I've done a lot of relationship maps before, but have never really been able to figure out a way to capture strength of relationship. How do you do that? Is it objective?
It's manual and it's subjective. What I'm presenting to customer success manager, we have now 153 customer success managers. I've built a tool for them. I urge them to understand that with this tool, I'm not measuring them. It's their tool to see all the relationships they have, 50, 60, 80 relationships. And we try to do as best as possible to understand what is 1 or 5 things, the strength of the relationship. So 1 is someone that will take a long time to get an answer over email, and they will almost not go, will be willing to meet with me or to go on a Zoom with me, while 5 is they will answer me within the day, and it will be very easy for me to schedule a Zoom call or a meeting within a week. So it's very defined.
Excellent. So Shane Reed, you mentioned Lucid Chart as the visualization part. Can you talk to that one a little bit?
Yeah, so we're in the process now of trying to get our CSMs to explore the breadth of their relationships across the organizations that we work with. We're specifically healthcare focused, and as a result, a lot of different silos. So on that front, we're doing some exercise with our sales team as well to understand where we have relationships. And because these organizations and health systems can be very vast, we wanted a good visual. And I don't think the org chart model necessarily gives that, just because of dotted line relationships, et cetera. So Lucid Chart just has that ability to kind of give you a easy visual to understand where we might have some contacts, and the integration that happens with Salesforce, just to kind of what Viv was talking about, related to what's your strength of the relationship you might have with a contact, and then mapping that back to information and data, so that holistically as an organization, we can use our sales function or our CSM function to have an understanding, is that a good contact to approach? Have we failed in the past, or someone we should completely avoid? So early stages for us is where we're at relating to applying that globally and scaling it out, but definitely taking a look under the hood with some specific customers to see how successful we can be using that tool for our relationship map.
Does the tool sit on top of Salesforce? Is it integrated and pulling information out of Salesforce, or are you having to migrate information over and then kind of build from scratch in Lucid Chart?
So my understanding is it can integrate. That's where we're at right now, of just kind of working with our ops administrator to further understand the capabilities and how easy it is to link data from Salesforce into what you're building and mapping out within Lucid Chart.
Great, thank you. Christy.
Hey guys, Christy Faltruso, Vice President of Customer Success at IntelliShift. So I'm going to just piggyback off of Ziv's comment of how he's building out his model for customers. We're using other data that's not manually inputted, but stuff that we're gathering. So whether or not folks attend webinars, if they've attended events, if they've been present at EBRs. So all the things that we're doing across the customer journey, we pull that data in, whether it be through our CRM Salesforce or through Gainsight. And so we're using that for scoring. Customer success managers are inputting their own notes on their relationships. It's part of fields that they have to update with regards to like strength of the relationship, their sentiment, things like that, things that we can't automatically capture. But then we're building out this entire scoring all about like their engagement. How do they engage with our brand? And so like how responsive are they to invitations to attend webinars? Do they respond to emails? Support tickets, like have they submitted support tickets? Have they filled out NPS or other surveys? So all the things that they would do across the journey, we capture all of that and score against those activities, not just what the CSMs are capturing from sentiment. And then in addition to technology, besides using Salesforce and Gainsight to support that, we're also looking at a tool called Demand Farm, which is built into Salesforce, which is allowing you to do white space mapping and really kind of understand the org chart in a very dynamic way, so it's not static. I've used Lucid Chart in the past at other organizations, never integrated into Salesforce, so I'd be interested to hear how that works out for you, Shane. But these are the tools that I'm using and kind of how I think about it, piggybacking off of what Steve contributed.
And you're a Gainsight user. I know I think you're on your third or probably fourth now iteration.
Yeah.
Does Gainsight have a good visual relationship map process?
No, well, not one that I'm paying for. So if they do, it's not been part of the package that I've ever had access to. That said, not to say that they don't, I just don't have it. I will say, like, they have something where they connect with LinkedIn and they're able to their sponsor tracking, it's called. It's a feature, but they don't have a direct relationship with LinkedIn currently. So the data is not real time. And I know to get that integration with LinkedIn, there's a very long waiting list, and I don't believe that they're very high up on that list. So I don't know when they will have real time tracking, nor do I think that that's something that they're heavily investing in. But they have a notion of this sponsor tracking, which basically, if you manually link any profile to a contact record that lives in Gainsight, if they update their title and or company, that it would then alert you in the platform, so in the customer 360 lens, to say that there's been a change. But again, it's not real time, it's a bit delayed. We use it directionally, we do it so that we are paying attention to that. But again, it's not something that I would make part of our organizational workflow because it's just not real time.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Real-time data is so important, especially if relationships change and new people come in, or more importantly, people exit the relationship and you don't know it, right? That could be embarrassing.
Yeah. And so Ziv, you called out a good point. Like, yes, the relationship a good CSM would have with their contacts should give you signals as to what's happening way before LinkedIn or any other tool or system could or should. Obviously, though, with COVID, I think it's a great example of sometimes your champion or people that you had relationships with were gone before you had an opportunity to capture that. So I think we learned a lot during this period of time as well, and not to take those relationships for granted. Somebody did just ask what was the tool that I had mentioned. It was called Demand Farm. So that was the tool. I'll type it in there as well. I'll put the link.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Effie? Morning.
Hi, guys. Hi. I lead the customer success team in Elusive Networks, which is a cybersecurity firm. And again, I just, it's like everyone said, is the relationship. So I want to address two things: how we establish a relationship, and also I'm sorry, I forgot her name. She says she works with government and they're not so forthcoming in their information. Tanya, there you are.
Tanya.
Yeah. So first of all, I think most of us are in agreement that the relationships have to be established. And so one of the things that I asked many times, especially when I was hiring my team, I say, how do you establish this relationship as a CSM? I did hear a lot of, I take them out to lunch, I'll, wine and dine them. And that's, it's not a date relationship, thankfully. That's more like a sales tactic. But the ways that we incorporate it into my team is, like Christy mentioned, closing, having a very clear metric of how to measure, your relationship, how many times you talk to them, are you a trusted advisor? But also beyond that is the surveys, the cabs, feature or any sort of other requests, and close the loop with that. So if you have a customer that does fill out a survey or does ask for some sort of enhancement and you give it to them, don't leave it there. You have to close the loop and follow up with them and talk to them. And that's how you basically establish yourself and establish a relationship, and obviously the trusted advisor and everything that goes along with it. And regarding those customers who are not very forthcoming with information and how to get those like really lead executives, we started an executive sponsorship program where C-levels and C-levels sort of have that special relationship. And not every organization can do this, but if you establish yourself within your field, you could start having very exclusive events. So we have exclusive events for our CISOs, for example. And once you have that, they're sort of also a little bit more open with information that could then flow down to our CSMs. In addition, the more contacts you have and the more relationships you have, you don't have to have like 50, like Ziv mentioned, but you can have those key, 5 to 10, depending on what kind of product you have and what kind of structure. I find that many times if one team member is not so forthcoming, and even in a parallel group, that they may not do the same thing, but they may work together, the other person or group may be able to share. So those are little sort of tips and tricks in order to get that information. And unfortunately, I do feel like when you do meet your customers in person, nothing beats it. They're going to be sharing a lot more, especially if you're in their office. They'll sit you next to them. They'll like, hey, look at your product. Let me show you how I use it. And then you get all this information that you would never get in a Zoom. Unfortunately, there's just nothing like that. I miss it, and I hope we can get back to that soon.
It's hard. It's hard to do. So Scott Morgan, I'm going to call on you. You put something in the chat about contacts, making sure that you're identifying contacts that have influence and social currency. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Yeah, you had put something in the chat about making sure that you identify contacts that have influence and social currency within the organization.
Okay, yeah, that relates to Effie's comment, right? Is that having the proper contacts in the organization help gain information, right? And drive your product inside, being that champion. So, I mean, I know that in my experience, I've had contacts that, to me, to my face, they talk us up all over the place, but inside the organization, they don't have the social capital or the influence at all to make any decisions or influence a decision or anything. So it is important to discover that and then find those people that have that information or that social capital and influence, so that those decisions can be influenced in your favor, right? And also to Effie's point is that those people also give us information like when they're leaving, who's leaving, who's being onboarded next, well in advance of finding it on a newspaper or a trade journal or anything like that. I know several of our clients, we have those relationships where we know months in advance that they're going to leave or whatever. And so then we can prepare. So then that risk of that resource, of that customer leaving their organization doesn't affect our overall customer relationship. We can prepare and start building a relationship with the person who's going to replace them. And that's been a big help.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. So one of the things that Manan asked about was aligning both sides' executive engagement. So we've talked a little bit about executive sponsors. How have you guys used, what techniques have you guys used other than executive sponsor programs, excuse me, or in the case of executive sponsor programs, where somebody isn't engaging and you're having trouble aligning people and getting them to communicate with each other? Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Just wanted to add a point in on that subject. So I think it also ties into the relationship building as well in some respects. And that's really to stay very fluid with your executive alignment. Because I think it's very tempting to just set up an executive sponsor program and nominate an exec from your own company who's going to have the relationship with this particular customer and leave it at that. But actually the relationship changes over time. And I think you need to retain some fluidity on the executive sponsorship level as well. So a perfect example of that in my previous company was we had one customer, very important customer, who were having issues with our contract process and the way that we were invoicing and billing extra services and things like that. So on speaking to the main contact, I quickly realized that actually they needed to meet our CFO. So I completely realigned the exec sponsorship relationship, spoke to our CFO, got him to become the exec sponsor. We weren't that far away from a user conference. So set them up with a VIP dinner with our CFO, and just over that dinner with the CFO, it completely turned the relationship around. The relationship improved, the executive sponsorship level improved, engagement at all levels across that customer improved, and totally changed that what was a dying relationship into a very strong relationship, and actually changed the region where we led that from. It moved from being a US centric customer relationship to a European relationship, and actually that worked on both sides of the us as a vendor and them as a customer, and changed the dynamic of the customer. So just wanted to throw that point in, tying both executive sponsorship and relationships in together.
Yeah, makes great sense. Thank you. Thanks. Kevin, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you. So some of the things that that I like to do is to set expectations up front and have a conversation around how we want to develop the relationship. One of the first things that I do is try to get a good understanding of the company and understand that if there's a certain executive that I would like to be engaged with, understanding, well, are they more interested in working with relationships that make them billions of dollars like their company does, where they're not really interested in having a relationship with their CSM for their communication tool? In that particular sense, what I would suggest, if they are involved in our onboarding call, is if there's a person that they would like to have delegate, that can have these conversations with me on their behalf, report it back up to that executive stakeholder, and we can expand on those conversations if he sees any value on those things that me and that delegate are talking about. So understanding that it's all about the time of the customer and not my time and not my agenda. So making sure that I'm setting those expectations from the beginning to understand what and set the rules of engagement for our relationship going forward.
Wow, so that's a new concept. That's actually a concept I've not thought about in the past, of having a delegate for an executive be able to talk with them and build that relationship.
A lot of it has to do too with a lot of different companies have different processes, and it isn't necessarily always the executive stakeholder that can sign off on buying decisions. A lot of times they have people underneath them that can make those buying decisions too. So that's part of that rules of engagement discussion that we have. Do we need to go all the way back up to you to have you guys sign off on any initiative? Do we need to go all the way back up to you to have you guys sign off on purchasing? So understanding those relationships and understanding those delegates helps to be able to move the conversations without having to involve somebody that doesn't necessarily want to be involved, and trust the people that are part of his organization to make those decisions for him.
Excellent, great. Michelle Novak, good morning.
Good morning. I'm a manager of CS at Iterable, based in the New York City metro area. And our company is currently going through SOAP initiatives and really starting to build out those strategies. And one of those is having our top 30 accounts. Each one of them has an executive stakeholder from our side. So whether it's our CEO, COO, VP of customer success, whatever, who has been paired up with an executive stakeholder at one of those top 30 accounts, so that they have regular communication from that high level. And so that's been a focus that we've put on this year to help make sure that on those really high level accounts, we have those relationships, because they are not likely to join QBRs and other things like that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And is it your executives, how often do your executive sponsors meet with their counterparts?
I believe it's quarterly.
Okay. Do you allow that, is that a prescriptive model, or do you allow them to work with each other to set what works best for their relationship once they...
Yeah, I think in every case, it's really individual based on both stakeholders and needs and, you know, kind of the topics that need to be addressed with them.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing. Rod.
Hey, David. Just a question to the group. So at my company, we had relationship maps and we had kind of a man-to-man offense or a man-to-man defense, right? It's like the executive, this is the person you need to engage with, and the CSM would have a key stakeholder defined as the first priority, and then the next level up is the second priority. And then that person's manager, they would take their current level of management plus one level management up. I'm just curious, did you guys have a structured relationship map saying this is the person you need to engage with and your boss needs to engage with that person plus one level up, or was it a little more defined? I'm just curious. It's a question to the group.
Andreas, you've got your hand up.
Yes, and that is part of our engagement plan, this communication structure that has multiple tiers to foster relationships with equally titled people on the one hand, and also have an escalation structure, right? If something doesn't work in level 1, let's go to level 2, and what is the information that you need to communicate in what frequency at each level? And that model is discussed, so mostly in the enterprise space with the customer, so everyone knows already ahead of time what the expectation is. Not that someone gets suddenly an email, it's like, hey, you're level 3 in our communication plan, and so therefore they are totally confused. So that it's an active managed relationship all the time. So in those times of exception, that you have already something established that the right people can talk to each other.
Yeah, we did the same thing, Andres. Thank you.
Yeah, Andres, are you building those escalations into your relationship map?
Yes.
Interesting. Chris Mitchell, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, just to make sure that to Andreas's point, where you've got that map, it's got to be a multi-level relationship, but also make sure it's across your sales team as well, because obviously you're going to have potentially an account manager, maybe an account executive as well. So work out what the tactical relationships are and what the strategic relationships are, but also allow the discrepancy. So it may be that the CSM is having a conversation 1 or 2 tiers up, but they then have to have a conversation that would normally stray into the sort of zone of the sales rep. So make sure they've got the accountability to have that conversation to a certain point and then feed back in. So where you understand those escalation points, and you always have the sort of foresight a couple of levels up, also go across roles as well within that, and then make sure you're then feeding that back in. So you've got that full sort of map of how you integrate sort of tactical, strategic, and higher level, but then also across the roles as well. So almost like that matrix relationship.
Thanks, Chris.
Very good. So one of the questions that was asked before, which I thought was a great question, and that was by Josh, the best technology to scrape LinkedIn information, right? Most of us are really, really good. If you think about yourself as a person, as a business person, you're really good at keeping your LinkedIn profile up to date. You're probably not as good as keeping your CRM up to date, and your people certainly are probably not as good as keeping their CRMs up to date. I would imagine relationship maps fall in that category as well. Has anybody found great technology where you can look for changes in LinkedIn and use those, whether manually or in an automated fashion, to update your relationship map? I know I've not heard of any technology to do that. Adam's got a solution for us.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a solution, but it's a new technology that I came across recently. And just to comment on the LinkedIn piece, and have used Gainsight in the past as well, don't anymore, but the challenge with using LinkedIn, and Sales Navigator will also do what Gainsight is trying to do as well. But generally speaking, no one no one changes their LinkedIn profile until they have a new job, right? So that's one thing. But there's this really cool technology. It's free to use. It's a site called theorg.com, and it's Sequoia funded, and they're trying to democratize org charts. So I've literally gone in there, and what I do is I follow all of our customers, and it's amazing the content that's on there. So you can only actually add or update an org chart if you have the same domain as that company. So it is validated by someone in that company. And depending on the market you serve, but this is an enterprise group, I found it to be incredibly rich. So if you go to a company like GitLab as an example, it's pretty rich. Cisco, like the big companies, it's amazing what you can find. And you'll get notifications whenever someone changes roles. And I found that to be a nice complement to LinkedIn.
Ah, that sounds like breakthrough technology. That's fantastic. It could be game changer. Has anybody else found anything else, or have any of you trained your CSMs so that when they connect with a customer on LinkedIn and they see a change come through, they know to think about going back to your relationship map and making that change? Is that a training process anybody has incorporated? Not yet. Jeremy, hey, good morning.
Hey, David. So it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a training, but we do use Gainsight alerts to create calls to action when we have LinkedIn changes, so that we keep Gainsight and Salesforce up to date, meaning that if a contact leaves an organization or there is a title change or contact change, that the CSMs are even if it is reactive, are making that information change in Salesforce and in Gainsight, so that contact information, title information, or any other relevant details related to that contact is staying up to date on the account. So we do actually have all that automated, as long as the CSMs are actually updating the LinkedIn URLs for those contacts in Gainsight. As long as that's being done up front when those contacts are being loaded, then that'll happen automatically as a part of our CTAs.
That makes a lot of sense. So one of the things we haven't talked about yet, and I know somebody mentioned it before, are the components that you would want to include around individuals in your relationship map. What are the types of pieces of information that you want to know about them that makes that relationship map rich and valuable for you? Sherry, we haven't heard from you. You knew it was coming.
You guys like to do this to me. Where's Nils? I know he's laughing somewhere. There he is. Honestly, this is a bit of a struggle for us. I would love to be able to have some kind of LinkedIn notification tied to our software. We don't currently, and we're about to migrate to Salesforce for our CRM. So maybe that's something we can do in the future with our CS software as well. What we do currently, really honestly, is like with our account planning. I have very detailed parts of our account plan that outline not only the title and the role that well, first let me backtrack. This was also get buy-in from sales. I will say sales does our best, especially because we're bringing in larger enterprise accounts. I try to go with the pyramid model of 1 exec, 2 champions, and like 3 power users, or some kind of mix of that. That way, if someone were to leave, we're a lot less in a position of risk, and we still have other people to connect with and have relationships built with, rather than being so single-threaded. So when a new account comes in, these are all part of the account plan. So not only do we have that built in, like what's their role, also their influence. How much influence do they bring to this contract and the renewal? Are they a budget holder? That kind of thing. And then we even go to persona, like someone was saying earlier, like a talker, like mobilizer, talker, and blocker, because you can have a champion who tells you everything, but has crap skills at mobilizing, really can't get anything done. And oftentimes, and I know I've been victim to that, at some point, you fall into the sense of complacency because you have someone that gives you all this information, that joins every call, that does all of these things with you. And you're like, all the signals are good. this isn't at risk, and then they churn. And that's because this person has zero influence. So if we start from scratch and we say, we know from the beginning, these are who is involved, this is who has influence, and this is their persona, kind of like that org chart, we have a better handle on that. And it is the CSM's job to make sure that that is updated. That account plan is a living document. It's not just filled out when an account comes in. So that's part of how we're doing it. And, you know, when the deal closes as well, like getting involved right from those early stages.
Excellent. Excellent. Makes a lot of sense. Well, we're getting called back into the other room. So keep in mind, what you want to do is figure out what a good takeaway is that you can implement literally tomorrow and put some action to use. Thank you guys for joining the conversation.
Hey, good to see you. Looks like we're getting a few more people back in here. Awesome. Hope everybody's having a good Thursday. All right, looks like we're back. Austin Shrum, that beard is nice work.
Austin, the beard's a hit.
Yeah, you came across the screen and I just had to call it out. Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed the session today. We'll go ahead, maybe kick it over. David Ellen, if you don't mind, maybe coming off mute and sharing a couple of things from the enterprise section. You know, I think there was maybe a sub-focus around relationship mapping and how we're make sure, you know, to get to the right areas of the right account. So maybe pop over and tell us a little bit about what you heard.
Yeah, we had some great comments about the different types of components that need to be considered when you're building your relationship map. Things around looking at who's influencers, who are blockers, who are people that come to meetings but don't really do anything, and who are the doers. I know Andreas talked about political influence in your map, who influences others on a political basis, and looking specifically to where you see gaps and trying to fill those gaps in your relationship map. That was one really good conversation. And then we also had a great conversation around escalation structures and making sure that in your relationship map, you're building in multi-tier relationships so that if you hit a challenge with somebody, how do you get to that next level? How do you move that relationship, or do you target somebody else and go to that other person and be able to keep the conversation going? It's really good conversation around that.
Awesome. Was there, just curious, from your perspective, David, was there talk of where to track this or how to keep track of this on a regular basis? Anybody have any interesting thoughts just around maybe technologies or spreadsheet or anything where they were kind of keeping this as they went forward?
Yeah, there were some interesting technologies. Most of them I had not heard about. One is called Lucid Chart, and a couple of people had used it in the past. Some people still use it as a way to visualize a relationship map. Another one is Demand Farm, which I wasn't familiar with either. And then a third one that I heard was called, looking for the name of it.
The org?
Well, the org was one of them. One of the pieces of conversation that we had was trying to figure out how to scrape LinkedIn information about people moving, relationships, people changing jobs, and then bringing that back into relationship maps.
Yeah, that's great.
And
awesome.
I can tell you, I have used Altify before. Altify has an account planning process that has a visual relationship map built into it with color coding. Also a good tool.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, David.
Sure.
Willow, let's kick it over to you. You know, from the SMB side of things, I think one of the challenges that we always hear about is, you know, kind of smaller account size, might only have a single relationship that we're really relying upon. So curious what you heard in the SMB room on maybe how to get outside of just a single relationship.
Yeah, I think one of the main things we heard is actually use that relationship to expand within that organization. So rather than going above your champion or around your champion, use your champion to facilitate the relationships with your higher ups. We also heard kind of what happens when that champion leaves. So creating a personal relationship with that champion is really important in the SMB orgs. And then you might know they're leaving before they leave. And then if they leave, be a partner in their with the new person that comes on to make them your champion from the beginning. You know, do a training plan, do an onboarding plan so they can get kind of back in there it was really leveraging the champion rather than trying to create a relationship above them, use them to kind of tout your success, kind of. Another thing that we really harped on was you can't do it all, right? So we need automation and tools, even as simple as having the sales team write down who your champions are so you can port that over into your CS platform so that you know that stuff. And that's a huge win, and it's going to kind of move everything a little bit faster. It was interesting, David, that you mentioned tools, because the last thing I said was, I think I'm going to throw up in the community what tools everybody is using, because it seems like we in the SMB group could use some suggestions on tools. We've been shying away from it because they're kind of sometimes expensive. So the main tool people are talking about is LinkedIn. But I'm wondering which of those tools might work for the SMB group too.
Yeah, no pun intended, but one of the things I would recommend would be to, we were only able to scrape the surface on the tools conversation. Go over to Gain, Grow, Retain, and let's start a conversation about tools for relationship mapping, both on the SMB side and on the enterprise side. I think we can get much deeper there.
That's great.
Yeah, I agree.
And Willow, I like the point too that you mentioned about thinking about the new, as we have somebody leaving the organization who's been a champion, who's even been a power user or anything, trying to find who's going to be the replacement of that person, and how do we start building the relationship even before they move into that seat. I think sometimes it often goes overlooked, but thinking about almost like its own transition plan, right? And treating it almost as if it's coming over as a new sale, and making sure we're thinking about that. So awesome. Well, thank you, David and Willow, for leading those sessions. Again, just to hit on a couple of things before we hop off real quick. As Jay mentioned, we've got our diversity and inclusion group, or committee, excuse me, that's going to be starting to form here going forward. So if you do want to play a part in that, please reach out to us. We're going to have a kind of an email distribution. We're going to have a regular scheduled meeting. We're going to have some action that we're going to drive behind that group, as well as the group that attended that yesterday. If there is interest of trying to be the committee lead, again, reach out to us as well. We'd love to make that a formal part of the Gain, Grow, Retain community, and make that something, again, that is very action oriented. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind, we have Gain, Grow, Retain. So if you have an account, that's great. If you don't, feel free to go over and sign up. There's a great discussion that's happening, pretty much discussion happening daily. New posts going in. I think there's 30 or 40 posts that are happening a day, and just activity that we think is great in trying to keep the communication between these meetings going. So feel free to go do that. Feel free to invite people as well. We're trying to bring, again, more people into that discussion, more diversity. We're trying to bring just different opinions. As we know from customer success, it doesn't, there's not one size fits all. I tend to think that there's opportunities for us to learn from every situation. So please keep doing that. And as always, we'll see you next Thursday at 11:30 a.m. and appreciate everybody joining.
Say bye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have a great
Bye, everybody.
Everybody,
good to see you.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.